In Saw X, John seeks out alternative medical treatment for his brain cancer, but ends up getting scammed by a doctor offering a fake remedy to his illness. But he is far from the only victim. The scammer has an entire list of cancer patients she's cleaned out, like E. Edwards, S. Izuko, Sean Humphreys, and G. Romero. G. Romero is a reference to legendary horror director George Romero, known for his classic zombie franchise Night of the Living Dead. In Saw X, records show that G. Romero was conned for $263,000 before he died of lung cancer. The real-life George Romero passed away in 2017 at the age of 77 after a battle with lung cancer. The list of victims contains at least one other Easter egg. G. Collin is a reference to Gabriel Collin Cruz, the concept artist / graphic artist on Saw X, probably the guy who made this list. It's possible that Jay Carson is a reference to famous TV host Johnny Carson, but it may just be a coincidence, because while the real Johnny Carson did die, it was not related to brain cancer. The others that stuck out to me were C. Edwards, which isn't a reference but makes me think of Carl Edwards Jr. because I'm a Cubs fan, and Kay Green, which reminds me of this character from Weezer's Trippin' Down the Freeway. Don't ask me why my brain works the way it does. To learn about the true symbolism behind each trap in Saw X, stick around to the end of this video. Welcome to Things You Missed. Gotten a lot of mileage out of the shirt, which is why it's always available in my merch store. Saw X is, as the title suggests, the 10th entry in the long-running Saw franchise, but it was only the 9th to be conceived. Supposedly, writers Josh Stolberg and Pete Goldfinger started work on the script as early as January 2018, 3 months after the release of Jigsaw and 3 years before the first trailer for Spiral. But with Spiral being more of a new beginning, Saw X represents a return to the original saga in more ways than one. From the gritty visuals to the return of Tobin Bell as John Kramer, and the return of Kevin Greutert to direct. The question was, would this be more like Greutert's beloved Saw 6 or his maligned Saw 7? Well, it's a little bit of both. Chronologically, X is a sequel to the first Saw, but thematically, it's really more of a prequel for Saw 6, which, as you may remember, dealt with the trial of William Easton, who was forced to decide which of his employees would live or die, the same way that his health insurance company had to make life-altering decisions about which patients received coverage. It contains a scene where John tries to get the insurance company to pay for an alternative treatment in Norway, and Saw X is all about John trying to get that treatment.
I read about a doctor, a specialist of sorts, a Dr. Finn Peterson. He offered a treatment, a groundbreaking drug cocktail combined with surgery.
Hold up, who's this Finn Peterson? In Saw 6, the doctor's name was Soren Popescu. He's one of the most iconic Saw characters, other than Rich Skidmore, of course. We do learn that Dr. Peterson has been forced to go into hiding because he was on the cusp of curing many diseases, meaning that drug companies would be put out of business. This is something that appeals to John, who disagrees with the healthcare system in the West. Maybe Finn Peterson had to change his name to stay out of legal crosshairs of the drug companies, and Soren Popescu is a pseudonym. This character just gets more and more interesting. The doctor's exile is why his daughter, Cecilia, is supposedly taking over the practice and operating out of Mexico in a secret location. Cecilia's base of operations is filled with secrets, so let's cut in to the things you missed. Saw X begins with John lying in the dark and sitting up out of an MRI machine. There's a parallel here with the opening of the original Saw, where Adam Stanheidt sits up in a dark room, finding himself kidnapped and chained to a bathtub. Not only is this a sign that we're returning to the aesthetics of the first Saw, but also a little clue for the audience that this time, John Kramer will find himself stuck in one of the traps. We see him spending time at a support group for cancer survivors.
Today is a gift. That's why they call it the present.
I think the leader of the group should be put into a Saw trap just for that joke. It's kind of ironic that John needs to attend a cancer support group. It's a bit of a narrative refrain, because his cancer is what motivated his games. He wanted to make people appreciate their lives. But the survivors of those games would eventually need to be part of a support group of their own, the Jigsaw Survivor Support Group. One of the group members is named Henry Kessler, who would later approach John at a cafe. By the way, the woman working at the cafe is played by Bailey Guidry, also known as Jigsaw Girl, a TikToker who makes based content about Saw lore with excellent backgrounds. After Henry tells John about the cancer treatment, John goes home to email the doctor. His email is kramerjohn994@gmail.com. In April 2024, I received an email from johnkramer755@gmail.com, which is very similar. It came through my website's contact form, just like how John reached out to Dr. Peterson. It said, "Hello, I want to play a game, the choice is yours." To which I said, usually this part comes after the kidnapping. This triggered an automatic response. "Hello, thank thank you for reaching out. I will be traveling out of the country the next few days, so I may be slow to respond to any messages. If this an emergency, please give me a call at 1-310-564-8144. By the time I got around to making this video, the number had been repurposed as an ad for the strangers.
Camera here?
But you can find the original Saw message on YouTube.
Hello there. Thank you for reaching out. A very brave thing to do. I hear that you're looking for a restart, a cleanse. But I must ask, are you sure this is the right path for you? What you are about to experience will truly put you to the test. A test unlike any other that you've faced before. If you'd still like to proceed, simply text, "I want to play a game," to this phone number for your first challenge. Good luck.
Apparently, texting John just resulted in you getting Saw X teasers in your inbox. ARGs aren't what they used to be. John did reply to my email though, 17 minutes later. He said game over with a picture of Billy the Puppet. So just for kicks, I tried the email address seen in the movie. "Hello John, are you back from Mexico yet?" And I just got the same automated response. I can't help but wonder if my attempt to email Hoffman a while back was a partial inspiration for this marketing campaign. But it feels kind of a waste that the email seen in the movie is just part of a sequence that gets you teasers for that movie that you've now already seen. There are a few other examples of contact info seen, like John and Diego's phone numbers, which are both 555 numbers, so they won't work. In the deleted scenes, we also see an email address for William Easton and Cecilia Peterson. I tried emailing both. Cecilia's email address didn't exist, and William's didn't trigger a response. But luckily, those were not the only secrets the deleted scenes had to offer. Many Saw movies look to make a statement about some kind of current issue, whether that be the criminal justice system, the healthcare system, the criminal justice system again, or in this case, phishing scams against old people and medical tourism scams. According to the FBI, over 100,000 victims aged 60 and over fell victim to elder fraud in 2023, and I assume this is just in the United States, resulting in over $3.4 billion lost. It is a fact that John Kramer was only in his early 50s in Saw X, but I mean, look at him, I think the comparison still stands. We see John falling victim to what's known as a medical tourism scam. Mexico is a common place for Americans to engage in medical tourism because of the comparatively low cost of healthcare, sometimes half of what it costs in the United States. But doing so comes with a lot of risk.
Experts warn that traveling abroad for medical purposes can be dangerous.
It's this medical tourism that happens apparently all the time as Americans try to save a little money, but it's not always safe.
How safe is this medical tourism, and what's it really costing you?
Medical tourism is a relevant issue for Saw X because it first gained popularity in the 2000s when the movie takes place, and it's been surging in the early 20s thanks to a backlog of availability for surgeries caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. It's not just lower prices that'll cause people to travel for a procedure, it's also a way to make it happen sooner. According to this article on the risks of medical tourism, in many countries, scammers can obtain professional credentials and institutional licenses through fraud or in exchange for bribes. Or some countries may not have a system of credentials like in the US. A segment from medical talk show The Doctors adds that if something does go wrong, it can be a lot harder to recover your money or file a lawsuit, and doctors in the US may not cover the necessary post-operative care. It seems like the majority of medical tourism scams involve a scam artist who isn't qualified and is therefore at risk of botching the procedure, a scammer who prescribes surgeries that aren't needed, or a practice that cuts corners to save money, resulting in potentially deadly outcomes. I didn't find any real stories of scammers who only pretended to operate while not actually doing anything at all, like what happened to John, but there are other parallels. For example, Cecilia Peterson arranges for John to be transported by a taxi driver, who turns out to be in on the scam. This story from the International Association for Medical Assistance to Travelers warns about taxi drivers who take commissions from private clinics. The drivers will bring sick tourists to their friend's practice, and the doctors will overcharge, suggest unnecessary treatments, and require cash and credit card payments. This one is less about medical tourism and more about unsuspecting victims who happen to get sick on vacation. They recommend that if you're in an unfamiliar place, don't just hop in a cab and ask to be taken to a hospital. Do your research and ask to go somewhere specific. On the way to the location where John is going to be treated, the scammers stage a kidnapping under the guise that they need to keep their location a secret in case John is one of their enemies in the pharmaceutical industry. It reminds me of this story of 4 Americans who were kidnapped while traveling in Mexico for cosmetic surgery. The second level to all this is the idea that they were able to scam John because of his age.
So tell me, John, you've been doing this for a very long time, haven't you? How did I stop you? Am I just that good?
Don't flatter yourself. I just had a lapse in judgment.
In fact, there are a lot of red flags throughout the entire opening, things that a younger person would probably catch, but John doesn't. When he searches up Dr. Finn Peterson, all of the results come from fake-sounding websites like Article 3, M-Article, and Medical Article 5. Apparently domain names aren't necessary in the Saw universe, but either way, the fact that there's no coverage from reputable sites is our first clue. And the same can be said about the broadcast that he watches on Video Broadcast. We can see that this is a page on the PetersonProject.net website, but it's made to look like a video hosting site similar to YouTube. This is set in late 2004, by the way, so it was actually a little bit before YouTube was invented. Having 117,000 views on something like this would have been pretty much impossible back then, as would streaming in HD, and the channel name is just Medical Channel. It sounds like one of those titles that is so generic, it just had to be created by a scammer. By the way, in the current day, you can check for this icon that shows on videos made by real medical professionals. You wouldn't want your savage medical meme reactions coming from a fraud, after all. But one of the biggest red flags about the scam isn't related to technology at all.
The results have been stunning.
Over a 90% success rate.
There's an old saying, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Currently, for patients in John's age range, such a surgery only has a 9% success rate. Scammers love using ridiculous figures to overwhelm their victims, making them blind to the obvious logic. Think about the classic Nigerian prince scam, where an unsolicited emailer promises the victim millions of dollars in the future as a reward for spotting him just a couple thousand today while he doesn't have access to his funds. It seems ridiculous to me, but as I mentioned early on, it disproportionately affects people that are old and people that are desperate. And due to his cancer diagnosis, John falls under both categories. It's hard for me to fully understand the mindset of someone who falls for these scams, but what I always hear is that it works because the scammers are preying on hope. A while back, I saw this catfished video about a woman who sent her life savings to a scammer, in gift cards of course, because she was caught up in a love scam. Everyone around her straight up told her it was a scam. She was being documented by this film crew, and they were telling her it was a scam, but it didn't matter. She was so lonely after her husband died, and she wanted so badly for this relationship to be real that she couldn't see any other scenario. And that seems to be what's going on with John here. He's dying, and there's nothing he can do to stop it, and all of a sudden, there's this miraculous hope, and he latches onto it. But unlike the catfished woman, he eventually sees the error of his ways, which is made obvious when he removes his wrap and finds that they didn't even bother to shave his head. So he sets out to rehabilitate the culprits. The whole thing kind of recontextualizes Saw 6, doesn't it? I'm not saying William Easton was a perfect saint, but he sure was doing John a favor by denying the medical coverage to seek out this alternative medicine. After landing in Mexico, the cab driver points out the Monument to the Revolution and Angel of Independence. Both are dedicated to Mexico's War of Independence from Spain. It's somewhat symbolic because John Kramer has come to this country to be independent from the corrupt medical system in the US. Though, that's about to backfire. But exactly when does this all take place? I've done a whole video on the Saw timeline, which was made before Saw X was released. In that video, I placed Saw X in late 2004 or early 2005 based on the information available in the trailer. John's arrival date at the treatment center is set for Friday the 5th.
What date did you have in mind?
The 5th, Friday after next.
This leaves two possible dates, November 5th, 2004 or August 5th, 2005. Later, after his surgery, we see him sketching in his notebook with the date 11/7 listed at the top of the page. So I'm going with November 2004 for my timeline placement of Saw X. But this isn't an episode of horror history, and there are other secrets we can glean from the insides of John's sketchbook. Given the tight continuity of the series, every Saw is packed with Easter eggs and references to the other movies. And while Saw X is lighter on this, there are still plenty of examples. During the opening, we see the last will and testament of John Kramer, the legal document that divvies up his assets after his death. We saw this come into play in the 5th and 6th movies, when his ex-wife Jill inherited some items related to his final request to test William Easton and Mark Hoffman. We don't see the entire will, and it's possible that he changed it at some point, but it would appear that John planned the game at Rowan Zoological Institute, aka the Saw 6 game, much earlier than some of the others. I say this because of our next Easter egg. While chilling at the park after his surgery, John can be seen sketching up plans for the rack, the trap used to test Timothy Young in Saw 3. On the next page we see this. It's not entirely clear what it is, but it could be an early version of the blood sacrifice trap from the final room of the Fatal Fives trial in Saw 5, where the players had to stick their hand into a spinning saw blade and sacrifice enough blood to fill the beaker. In the deleted scenes for Saw X, there's another page of mock-ups for the rack, as well as a page with the design for the Magnum eye hole. which would appear less than a year later in Saw 2. Most of the other Saw references call back to the first one. Diego the cab driver's test is explained on an old Panasonic RN305, the same tape recorder Jigsaw used in the original. The test subjects Mateo and Gabriella realize that there's a cell phone nearby, and their initial plan is to make a clothing rope to reach it, which is just how Adam reached the tape recorder in Saw 1. And there's exactly one shot of the clock, where it's displaying the time 5:01, a potential callback to the original where Adam and Dr. Gordon had until 6 to win their game.
Your aim in this game is to kill Adam. You have until 6 on the clock.
Speaking of Adam, one of Cecilia's lines in the deleted scenes seems to be a direct reference to him.
We are liars. Both of us.
Face it, Larry, we're both bullshitters.
When John pulls off his head bandages to reveal the lie that's been sold to him, he does so in the exact same way that he pulled off his injury prosthetic at the end of the bathroom game, which revealed his lie to Adam. One recurrent symbol in the franchise is obviously the spiral, one of Jigsaw's calling cards. When Gabriella brings out the bottle of tequila for John before his surgery, the glasses have the spiral symbol on them as well. Obviously, this is more of a coincidence than anything. It's not like Gabriella is in league with John or something, just a little Easter egg for the fans. I'm not sure if this next one is a reference per se, or if they're just running out of ideas for traps, but the bloodboarding trap in Saw X is the same concept as the wax trap from the last movie, Spiral. It's not just Saw references though. If you pause at 31:24, there is an Amogus reference graffitied on the wall. It even has the first 3 letters, AMO. Although in reality, instead of one imposter among a genuine crew, it's a crew of imposters and one genuine cancer patient. Earlier I mentioned that Saw X has elements of both of Kevin Greutert's previous Saw movies, the healthcare angle from Saw 6, but also the idea of punishing a liar or a faker from Saw 7.
In ancient Egypt, if you were speaking under oath, you were required to say, "If I'm lying, take me to the quarries." That mean anything to you?
The main trial in that one revolves around Bobby Dagan, an author who wrote a book about his experience surviving one of John's twisted games. Only, it was completely made up. Bobby was lying about being tested by Jigsaw, so John arranged for him to go through a series of torture devices, and the finale was the very experience Bobby made up in his book.
Dang it, Bobby.
The traps in Saw X use the exact same concept. The so-called physician staged a fake surgery, so he forced them to perform real surgical procedures on themselves to survive. Valentina is introduced as a nurse who will draw John's blood, so he makes her draw quite a bit of her own blood by cutting off her own leg using a surgical saw known as the Jiggly Saw. As a side note, I love how we're making our way through the compendium of different types of saws, whether it be hacksaw, circle saw, buzz saw, power saw, or now Jiggly Saw. I think one of the few ones that hasn't been used yet, ironically, is a jigsaw. The next test subject is Mateo. He has to perform a craniotomy on himself and place a piece of his cerebral tissue in the vial to win. This is the procedure that they were supposed to be doing on John, and Mateo was supposed to be the anesthesiologist, but obviously that never really happened, so he's forced to play the game under the same conditions.
The only thing I have not provided is your anesthetic. But trust me, you will want to remain alert.
The tools needed for this are wheeled out by Jigsaw's avatar, Billy the Puppet. And the fact that Billy the Puppet is in Mexico can only mean that Amanda brought him. So she either drove 37 hours from New Jersey or shipped it to John, then met him there. Cause I know that thing didn't make it through TSA without raising some serious red flags. We never hear the explanation for Gabriella's game. She's forced to undergo radiation therapy, which is what John had to do at the beginning, but she's overexposed to it, and it's basically cooking her alive. She has to smash her foot and hand with a mallet to escape the shackles, which is also how Detective Eric Matthews escaped in Saw 3.
Brutality!
And speaking of brutality, the last traps are the bloodboarding trap and the gas chamber trap. The bloodboarding machine is designed for 2 people. Each of them can pull a lever to relieve the other from the torture. The people being tested here are Cecilia and her boyfriend Parker, the masterminds behind the fake surgery scam. But they are not the ones being bloodboarded. All they had to do was take mercy on John and Amanda and let them go without trying to reclaim the money that they'd finagled, which is sitting in the room upstairs. Instead, they force John and an innocent kid into the bloodboarding trap and try to make off with the money, which activates the gas room and deactivates the bloodboarding. I think there are a number of possible ways that this could have gone. Parker could have taken control and forced Cecilia into the trap with John. Cecilia could have taken the gun and forced Parker into the trap with John. And Cecilia and Parker could have forced John and Amanda into the trap.
But if you were the last player, who was supposed to be on the other side of that plank with you?
I'm guessing John had accounted for any of these scenarios, but did not account for Cecilia putting an innocent kid into the trap instead of Amanda. Personally, I find this plot to be on pretty shaky footing. I mean, the whole thing relies on luring Parker to the chemical factory where the game was taking place by leaving a cell phone in the room and allowing Cecilia to get it and call Parker for help. But how did Parker find out where they were? And how did John know Cecilia wouldn't just call the police first? But this plot oversight looks tiny in comparison to the other plot holes and plot craters that would follow. One recurring element in the film was the symbol of eyes. The nightclub that Gabriella visits before she's kidnapped features eye graffiti on the mirror, on the walls, and there's even the Spanish phrase ojitos, which translates to little eyes. Then, of course, there's the trap that John daydreams about at the beginning, the eye vacuum. Eyes are typically a symbol of being watched. I think back to the episode that I did on the Purge TV series. That city was also covered in eye graffiti as a symbol for government surveillance. I think the eye motif in this movie exists for similar reasons. John monitors the game through the use of cameras, and if you've seen my Jigsaw horror history episode, then you know all about how he makes himself out to be like a religious figure, punishing the sinners who do not appreciate their lives by putting them into these traps. He's very theatrical about all of his games because he wants the world to take notice. He wants people to live their lives to the fullest out of fear that they're always being watched by Jigsaw. And true to his word, the surveillance that he and his disciples do uncovers some other crimes outside of con artistry. But if you don't understand Spanish, then you might not find out about them. In fact, as far as I can tell, no version of this movie provides proper translations for the conversations in Spanish. The closed captions literally just say "speak Spanish," which is the laziest shit ever. Seeing "speak Spanish" in the captions has the same energy as this Brian with a Y coffee cup. Anyway, I painstakingly translated them. In Valentina's kidnapping sequence, this guy comes up and asks her if she wants to go somewhere more fun, and she accepts. They go to the car, but then she asks for money. He's confused, and she informs him, without money, there is no sex. So her secondary crime is prostitution. Which, side note, why would you sell yourself if you just got done ripping a guy off for $250K? I understand that number goes down because it's split between the 6 of them, but it's later stated that there were 38 victims over the course of 8 years. By my math, she's still making over $200,000 a year on a Mexico City budget. Mateo, on the surface, appears to have a more legitimate job as a janitor at a dog shelter, but his scene also reveals some shady activity. At the end of the night, he asks his coworkers if they left food for him, and they say yes. Seems innocent enough, until Gabriella comes in, and he calls her a bad word and tells her to get another distributor. So he's a dealer and she's an addict, and we know how Jigsaw feels about drugs. On that note, I actually think my favorite part of Saw X was seeing the beginning stages of Amanda's character arc that would complete in Saw 3. If you'll recall, Saw 3 was Amanda's final test to see if she could give victims a fair chance to win their games instead of just punishing them. She has the same attitude here, and John tries to guide her with his principle of giving them a chance to rehabilitate themselves.
That lady doctor deserves nothing.
Everyone deserves a chance.
And John says that much more calmly than he did with Hoffman in Saw 5.
Everybody deserves a chance.
An added wrinkle in Saw X is that she also has to come to terms with the fact that John is dying, which is kind of like another test for her. In Saw 3, Amanda's fatal flaw was making her traps unwinnable. Ironically, in my opinion, John's traps in Saw X are pretty unfair to the test subjects. In the first one, Valentina cuts off her leg before the timer expires, but because it takes a little bit longer to drain her bone marrow, she loses and she gets killed. Let's not forget that Dr. Gordon did the exact same thing a month ago. He cut off his foot after the time expired, and John still let him live. To make matters worse, every trap in the factory game is like this. Mateo accomplishes his task with a full 25 seconds to spare, but the chemical reaction takes too long and he's killed. Gabriella passes her test, but John and Amanda stand idle as Cecilia kills her, even though they know full well that the gun that they're being held up with has been loaded with duds. The John Kramer I know is a deranged psychopath, but he wouldn't let that happen because he thinks that he's doing the right thing. My guess is that he didn't want Parker to figure out that the gun was sabotaged. If Parker had tried to shoot it and it didn't do anything, then they'd still be in a situation where Parker and Cecilia are stronger than John and Amanda. But this is John Kramer we're talking about. He's always supposed to have a backup plan. The scammers weren't necessarily the smartest either. I mean, why would you go so far as to have Diego wear a fake beard to sell the part of the doctor, but then have everyone use their real names in front of the guy that they're scamming? I also have to ding them for how many times they asked to be let go.
I beg you, please. Please don't do this. Please. John, please. Please, 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 help me.
At some point, you just have to accept that it's not gonna happen. And while I'm in rant mode, does anyone else find it pretty stupid that they made a point to have John say that he sent the payment via wire transfer?
Dr. Peterson, just so you know, I'll wire the second half of the payment tomorrow morning.
But then, when it's convenient for the plot, this has been switched to a bag of cash. But despite all of those complaints, one thing that I do feel they got right was the epilogue. At the end, John grabs his notebook again. Earlier, we had seen him throw out his plans for the rack. It was like being cured of cancer had cured his anger, and he no longer felt the need to test subjects. But this experience brought back his cynical worldview, which kind of proves that he wasn't really fully testing people to help them overcome something. The last shot before the credits roll is Jigsaw opening the door and the light pouring in, which is the opposite of how these movies usually end, with someone closing a door to shut the victims into the darkness. Since John was a player in his own trap this time, I think this represents a new beginning lining for him. Usually, closing the door means game over, but John is opening the door to the final chapter of his life, which would consist of the upcoming events of Saw 2 and Saw 3, and maybe Saw 11. If you're interested in my analysis on that, make sure you subscribe to CZsWorld for new horrors every week, ring the death bell, and select all notifications, and I will see you in the next one. Assuming we both survive.